Hello, I just turned on the radio there and I heard your programme about Bible John, and that was a guy that murderer in the 60s, right? He made my life hell, you know, because I used to go to the dancing then, and I had buck teeth, and he was supposed to have buck teeth as well, I believe. But every time I tried to chat up a woman, she ran for the toilet. Obviously went to get my teeth fixed, so it's alright now.
It's 2 a.m. and you're listening to Furious Freddy's Phone In. Tonight we're talking 60s. Tonight we're talking murder. We're talking Barrowland. We're talking the Plaza. We are talking about one Bible John. Did you dance with him? Did you know him? Were you accused of being the poor man? I want your phone calls. I want them now. I want stories. I want tales. I want yarns and Bible. If you're listening yourself, give us a phone.
Glasgow, like most places, has known characters who put an end to life. It has also contained characters who murdered, but who were never known. Throughout the last 27 years, the exact period of my life, there has existed a mystery in Glasgow, the mystery of an uncaught serial killer. The killer's name is Bible John. The search for him is the same age as me. I am Andrew Hagan. We lived round the corner from his chosen pickup site. He's always surrounded us in some way, and at the same time he's been out of sight, but he sits at the back of my mind, turning like an old familiar record. I was working as a young detective in the north side of the city, and I was instructed to come down here because a body had been found in this lane. It was the body of a young nurse. Her name was Patricia Docker, and it actually was possibly the first in the series of what we came to consider the Bible John murders. The young lady was lying on her back here. She was in, one of her legs was twisted over, and there was a shoe, and obviously there was a ligature around her neck, and she actually was lying here. She was unclothed. We were instructed to come up, view the body, to view this area as the evidence and the starting point of the inquiry.
Every paper's front page carried pictures of this man, a killer who struck again and again in the heart of Glasgow. Dance hall regulars said his first name might be John, that he often quoted from the Bible. The headline writers had their name, but the police, despite intensive inquiries, did not get their man. To this day, Bible John has not been brought to book.
Having never worked on unsolved murder and working in this one, it has a kind of strange feeling about it, because I've grown up with Bible John, as is everyone in the west of Scotland. And the myth of Bible John, and to actually become involved and know all the detail and all the circumstances surrounding each murder, as a person I find fascinating and an honour, basically, to be in charge of the Bible John inquiry in 1995.
If you've lived in the same city for a long time, you tend to credit yourself with knowing the place intimately. You see it so clearly sometimes that you hardly see it at all. You might tend to miss the secret life of the place, the unthought about subterranean life that makes the city turn. The private affairs of the heart and the mind can be disrupted by the cold fear of an evil presence nearby. The story of Bible John became a focus, a gathering place of personal fears and secret lives in Glasgow. He preyed on very recognisable, normal, local women at the heart of Glasgow's nightlife. He met young women in the Barrowland dance hall. He took them from there and killed them.
The two bits of the Barrowland, one bit was called Geordie's Byre, and that's where all the kind of young ones went. What you would call now a yuppie and a poser, you would go to Geordie's Byre. If you were just kind of normal, you went up the stairs, and that was all the big band music. The routine was you up with your pals and the bags went on the floor and you all danced in the bags. But if somebody come up and asked you to dance, you couldn't refuse because you'd all sorts of bouncers all around the place watching. And if you refused to dance, they would come and pull you up and ask you why, because that's what you were there for. You were there to dance.
A lot of the people at the Barrowland on those Thursday nights, over 25's night, were not supposed to be there. They were married, and many of them would slip off their wedding rings at the door before going in. Permissiveness was in the air. It was in the music that was in the air, and sex was thought to be available and uncomplicated.
Generally we concentrated on the Barrowland and the Plaza because on certain evenings people would probably go there without their husbands or wives, and these were the kind of nights when the attacks had taken place. I checked this car, belonged to a chap in Coatbridge. Went out to see him. I asked him, I says, can I speak to you alone? He says, it's a rather delicate matter. But no, he says, I know you people. He said, if you speak to me, you speak to me in the presence of my wives. And I said, well, okay. Last Thursday night, between the hours of 8 and 12 p.m, your car was parked in Gallowgate outside of the Barrowland Ballroom. Can you tell me why it was there? Well, obviously there was a reaction. The chap went pure white. And the next thing he turned and he hit his wife the most awful smack right in the mouth. And he said to her, you swine, you told me you were your sisters that night. So that, obviously when that happened, we kind of beat a hasty retreat.
Well, we used to have such a good time at the dancing, but you know, once that investigation started, it made us feel really uneasy, and you weren't sure who you were dancing with, and you know, it just sort of wasted it for us. We had really good times up until then.
So afterwards, I mean, with Bible John being there and all that sort of thing, I mean, did every time you get a lumber, did you worry whether this guy was a practicing Christian or no? I mean, did you check him on the Bible or what?
After Bible John, they sent like plainclothes police in, but they stuck out lasso of thumb because you just knew. I don't know whether they just didn't dance the same, they didn't act the same, because they never got them in the toilet sitting having a wee fly off or anything like that, no. So they just, you knew it was a post, no, and obviously if Bible John was there, he must have known. So I mean, he's not going to try and abduct somebody when they're there.
When you went to the dancing these nights, it was funny. I think it's the only time that most of the chaps in the Bible John inquiry were pretty much like myself. They were ugly, they were tired, but you would always find that the young ladies were quite prepared to dance and talk to someone that thought you were a Bible John detective, because it was the only person that they felt safe with in the hall. So at that time you really started to feel that you were making your mark in the community.
When I was about 8, when I was first growing up, and there was all the thing about Bible John, and I used to see his photo and all the words about the Bible and all that, I actually thought it was Jesus. I know this sounds really stupid, but I actually thought Jesus lived in Glasgow.
The second murder would be Jemima MacDonald. Again, inquiries revealed that she had been to the Barrowland Ballroom prior to her death. So, by this time, the police inquiry is covering 2 murders. Both would appear that the victims had been to the Barrowland Ballroom. So when the second murder occurred in August 1969.
He took them into alleys and back courts. He beat them around the head. He forced open their coats, pulled off their clothes. He sexually assaulted them. He put tights around their necks and strangled the breath out of them. All the women were menstruating. He put their sanitary towels under their arms or threw them on top of their lifeless bodies. He left them dead in the dark corners of Glasgow and made off into the night. No one was left untouched by this. No one unmoved by it.
In Glasgow at that time, there was almost an aura of mystery, like in the old days when Jack the Ripper was roaming the streets of London, because I remember Glasgow in those days was still having its fogs and its mists and the dark winter nights, and there was still the Wally Closes and the gas lamps with the man with the leery going round and setting light to them, so you're full of flickering shadows. I originally got involved with the case of Bible John through working at a forensic psychiatry clinic with a psychiatrist called Rob Britton, who was helping to develop a profile of sadistic killers at that time. Most serial killers' patterns of killing involved a degree of obsession. I think with Bible John, there were
three main rituals I can think of. One was the strangulation, the same pattern of strangling. There was the fact that there were menstruation at the same time, and I think the taking away of the handbag, and also in putting the sanitary towels under the armpits, which somehow seemed to symbolise something for him.
We prefer to think that brutal killings happen elsewhere. They don't happen to you or yours. Bible John was a new sort of thing. Even in a sometimes violent city, he represented a new sort of random, motiveless, invisible murder, and he introduced new fears. Those dead women could have been our mothers, who danced at the Barrowland, who sang those songs, wore those coats.
In 1969 I was working for the Daily Record, and I covered all three murder cases. Well, of course, women had been murdered in the past, being escorted home from parties and dances, but this was the first hint of a serial murder in Scotland, ever. And the public thought it was very chilling.
I never really ever thought, oh, I'm going to get Bible John in here. I remember reading the cases and being horrified. No, they were strangled with their tights and things like that, no, and it was quite terrifying. But as I said, I was young, and things like that kind of didn't really frighten you then. It wasn't you get older and you start doing and thought about it and say, God, I could have met him. I could have actually danced with him in Barrowland, no?
One of the other factors I don't think that was thoroughly looked at was the fact that Bible John may have been quite a lad round the dance halls in Glasgow in that time, and because of his shy, quiet nature, might have picked up quite a few women and taken them home. Fortunately for them, they may not have been menstruating at the time he took them home, and it might have been an entirely successful relationship for him. And it may have been the misfortune of the three individuals who he did kill to be menstruating, which seemed to be the trigger for the offending.
Helen Puttock, who was 29, went to the Barrowland Ballroom, Glasgow, with one of her sisters on the night of October 30th, 1969. Inside the ballroom, sometime after 11 o'clock, she was seen with a tall man who had reddish hair. Shortly afterwards, she and this man left together.
Because of the relatively close time span of three murders, it did affect the city. And these days, Glasgow was very much a city of dance halls. Most people went to dancing. I was brought into the squad for the third murder inquiry, and we were working on that one. By this time, the murder was identified as Bible John, and as a result of this, there was a tremendous amount of media interest. Of course, there was the fact that this man was suspected of committing three murders, so that meant it really became a massive inquiry.
Helen Puttock was the last victim, so far as we know. Her death brought the fear of this man to a head, and that fear changed everything. The 60s had been about sexual innocence, while the hangover of the 70s lay just ahead. In 1969, in Glasgow as elsewhere, innocence was running out, and Bible John was one of those figures who made people suddenly fearful and less free.
After Bible John and all that, I mean, you just didn't take the chance to take it longer, because not that you thought it was going to be Bible John, but if there was one weirdo in Barrowland, it could be more than one. Simple as that, so you just didn't take the chance.
Good evening, caller. What did you want to tell me?
When I was about 5, I remember my mother had warned me that I was never ever to take shortcuts or go down the lane near our school, because if I did, Bible John might get me. But one day, she couldn't come and collect me from school, and she sent a friend along, and she wanted me and her children to go down this lane. I was so frightened, I started screaming and crying and holding on to the railings, and I just wouldn't move, because I was convinced that Bible John might be down there and he would get me.
A manhunt is a strange thing. It forces people to give an account of themselves, to explain where they were and who they are. It forces a ransacking of houses and shops and records, an upturning of privately held information, a focusing on the domestic and the very normal, all in search of something terrible, something abnormal. It's like a sort of social spring cleaning, leaving in its wake a feeling of having been touched by horror and extremity. Old Partick Police Station is derelict now and empty. It was once full of officers chasing this unknown stranger.
Right, gentlemen, the situation is still the same. He's out there and we're in here. There's one or two things. First of all, I'd like the corporation posters out, or the posters out for the corporation before this weekend.
We were led at that time by Joe Beattie, and we all worked very hard in that inquiry, but nobody worked harder than he did. And we had to take a lead from this man. This man was working 18 hours a day on the inquiry, and we all did the same. We worked long hours. We were allowed eventually, about a year into the inquiry, we were allowed to have one day off a week.
There were police officers who were obsessed by the thing, and I mean, I don't know whether it's fair to say that Joe Beattie was probably obsessed himself, because he swore blind that if he ever saw Bible John face to face, he would instantly recognise him. He used to get a photograph of a suspect and look at it with a magnifying glass, and then he would say, no, that's not him, his teeth are too long, or there's something else that's definitely not him.
This is the fellow we're looking for, and he has a definite hairstyle, short and brushed to the right. Yes. And very, very neat. Gives the appearance of maybe being lacquered. Oh yes.
The description was so vivid, and we identified many people who we thought was similar to the description of Bible John. We interviewed well over 5,000 people for that, and there was about 500 formal identification parades, but hundreds of identification parades which were of an informal nature, as long as the person who was involved in them agreed to that.
The files cover everything, because this sparked off one of the biggest manhunts Scotland has ever known. Every avenue was covered. The churches were covered due to the Bible aspect. Dentists, barbers, tailors. Every tailor was visited, and tailors that are no longer here with us, you know, the Hector Powes, Claude Alexanders, Alexandres, names that disappeared since the 60s.
It's a most unusual suit. You see the 3 buttons and the high lapels.
Yes, it's like the old Italian style suits.
It's just total involvement. You're thinking about it constantly. You don't stop. You work all the hours, take a break, you go home, you sleep, you get up in the morning, you're back out and you're into it. And the first thing you do when you get in is to see what happened during the time you were off duty.
It was the media who christened him Bible John, that sinister interest in the Bible he'd shown in the company of the third victim. And people, local people, seemed to want him to be one man. They wanted to believe in him. They imagined him up. They concurred with the newspaper's idea of him, and they looked over their shoulders to see traces of him on the faces of those around them. He became this biblical ogre, a terrible and terribly local sort of everyman. There were bits of everyone in our idea of the killer.
Hi Freddie, this is Pam. About Bible John, what I remember more than anything is the identical face on the front of the papers, except at the time I didn't know. I thought that's what his face really looked like. And I found him scary because he looked like Frankenstein, because his face didn't fit together.
Police then tried something new, something entirely new in Scotland, PhotoFit.
Bible John here, his hair fairly reasonable. This is as it was seen that night. If he changed the style slightly, maybe on George's best idea.
We received a memo from the Chief Constable of Glasgow asking us, because we were out on the road all 24 hours of the day, if we saw anyone that we considered looked like the photograph that the newspapers had issued, would we report it to whatever police office for. I had an incident myself where at Glasgow Cross I met a chief inspector and a sergeant, and I told them that I had seen this chap walking along here, which is the Gallowgate, and he went into the Gallowgate bar, and in my opinion he bore a strong resemblance to the photograph that had been in the local newspaper. My nose was bothering me. I wanted to find out just what the police were going to tell me, and had I been the one that had caught Bible John. Anyway, I told all my friends when I went into the garage that night that I had saw someone, and everybody immediately jumped in and said, oh, we've all seen this Bible John, haven't we? Because they all had seen guys that looked at Bible John.
I just think that your show hasn't really made the point yet that how difficult it was for some of the men. I was suspected of being Bible John, and I had to carry a card eventually, issued by the police saying, you know, this guarantees I wasn't Bible John. And it was hellish. I mean, practically destroyed my life. I don't think that I've even got over it yet, even though, you know, it's 27 years, as you say.
And have you still got the card?
I've got a card somewhere, but, you know, I don't look at it. It really upsets me.
I bet you it does, because you haven't had much of a chance of lumber with a card like that. Thank you. Good night.
Next caller, please.
This chap that I used to associate with a long time ago, he lived in the Milton scheme, the northern part of Glasgow, and some neighbours had actually reported this chap to the police as being someone they should interview because they thought that he looked like the photograph of Bible John. And he was given a card or a pass from the police. He had been stopped at many times by the police that he needed this card to make sure that he wasn't going to be taken down to the local police station and quizzed again. He was quizzed that often.
I spoke to my pals about it at the time, and they said it was probably him, you know, because he did have he had the same tie on as he had in that picture, and his hair was the same.
But then, was that not the whole problem? I mean, all night long I've been hearing people who have been suggesting that because the guy had a certain tie, or a certain colour of hair, or a certain aftershave, it made him Bible John. I mean, don't you think maybe it was just mass hysteria?
You're just being cynical, Freddie. The thing is, you know, you're going on as if he doesn't exist or something. I mean, 3 women were murdered, you know.
No, I'm not suggesting that the guy didn't exist. What I'm saying is that there's certain people that got it into their heads that everybody, including fathers, brothers, lovers, were Bible John. What I'm suggesting is that maybe that's the reason he was never found. Is what happened was too many people were thinking too many people were Bible John.
Door-to-door inquiry regarding Bible John.
Well, you never know when a case is going to crack. You work as hard as you can all the time. And it's only on the very last day when they decide that it's disbanded. Then you have a sense of underachievement. You feel you haven't achieved, you haven't done what you should be doing as a detective, because there is a necessity in every detective, because of their makeup, if they're good, to solve the crime that they've been delegated to solve.
When the trail went cold, there lingered a feeling of frustration and doubt. The case was tied to a time of general change. It still brings to mind a very definite period in the life of the city, but it has carried forward. It is part of the here and now. People still live with it, much as they always have.
Basically, we rely on the public for information, and in fact, I've got 3 or 4 letters here that just come in over the past 48 hours from a small article appeared in one of the Sunday newspapers there. And we've had letters in from people recently who are still looking at a 27-year-old, a 25-year-old man, but they only seen him last year in Holland, in Tunisia, you know, and when they spoke to him, he ran away. They've never seen again. I think this is strange. Maybe you should look at that. We've also had letters in from people that say, I don't think it would be him because he wasn't a great dancer. Over a year's period, we're probably talking, you could get 30, 40 letters a year. If there's anything in the media about it, that'll boost it up. You know, it can go over 100 then. Yeah. And that's been for 26 years. So you can imagine the amount of paperwork that it does generate. You know?
You've got to be really sensitive to the fact that one letter may hold the key.
In spring 1996, 27 years after the killings, the body of a man, John Irvin McInnes, was exhumed from a Lanarkshire graveyard. Police suspect he may be Bible John and are DNA testing his remains. A positive match will provide an answer, but it may be a strangely unsatisfying one. McInnes might solve part of this mystery, but the myth of Bible John remains strong. We may have to live with the notion that Bible John is part of this place, and that no amount of new information will quite rub him away. We live with killers. We know that now. We've got used to thinking about them. We can feel we are surrounded by them, by our interest in them, by the interest of others. We make films about violent death. We write books about it. We play arcade games based on it. Now, more than ever, we seek to understand ourselves by trying to understand killing. If killing is meaningless, perhaps much else is meaningless too. A killer such as Fred West becomes tangled with our thinking about Bible John. The discovery of serial killers today reminds us of past terrors. If so many women can go missing at a certain house in Gloucester over a period of 20 years and not be missed, then perhaps our lives are less visible than we think. Perhaps absence is a keynote of our time. and a theme in our communities in ways we never dreamt of. Perhaps Bible John is so symbolic, so invested with local anxiety and feeling, because he tells us something crucial about our places, about times passing, and about the possibility of lives passing suddenly and terribly, right in front of us.